The hotel concierge looked at me with barely concealed embarrassment as my platinum credit card was declined for the third time. "I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Whitmore," she whispered, glancing nervously at the other guests in the marble-appointed lobby of the Grand Resort Santorini. "Perhaps you have another form of payment? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." My husband Richard stood behind me, his arms crossed and a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Financial difficulties, darling?" he said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Maybe you should have been more careful with your spending habits." I turned to face him, my voice calm and steady despite the humiliation he was attempting to orchestrate. "Actually, Richard, the only financial difficulty here is your assumption that you control my resources." I pulled out my phone and made a quick call. "Yes, this is Elena Whitmore. Please wire $2 million from the Cayman account to my Swiss account immediately. The authorization code is 77 Alpha 9 Delta." The color drained from his face as I hung up and turned back to the concierge. "I'll be paying cash for our remaining stay. In fact, I'll be purchasing the penthouse suite for the remainder of the month. My husband, however, will be taking the next flight back to New York, alone." That moment in the Santorini hotel lobby was the culmination of 15 years of financial manipulation, emotional control, and systematic underestimation that had finally reached its inevitable conclusion. What Richard never understood was that while he was busy playing power games with credit cards and joint accounts, I had been building an international financial empire that made his pathetic attempts at control look like a child's allowance scheme. The irony was almost poetic. Here we were, supposedly celebrating our 15th wedding anniversary at one of the most exclusive resorts in the Mediterranean, and Richard had chosen this moment to demonstrate what he believed was his ultimate power over me. He had carefully orchestrated this humiliation, timing the credit card suspension to coincide with our most public moments, clearly expecting me to beg, plead, or somehow submit to his financial authority. What he had failed to realize during our entire marriage was that Elena Whitmore had never been the financially dependent wife he imagined. While he saw a woman who managed household expenses and occasionally complained about budget constraints, the reality was far more complex and infinitely more powerful than his limited imagination could comprehend. The story of how we reached that moment began 3 years earlier, though the foundation had been building throughout our entire relationship. Richard Whitmore was a successful investment banker who had built his identity around financial control and social status. When we met at a charity gala in Manhattan, he was immediately drawn to what he perceived as my elegant dependence and sophisticated appreciation for the finer things in life that his wealth could provide. Our courtship followed predictable patterns for his social circle: expensive dinners at exclusive restaurants, weekend trips to his family's estate in the Hamptons, carefully orchestrated introductions to his professional network, where I was presented as a charming accessory to his growing success. The engagement ring was a flawless 3-carat diamond that he selected without consulting me, presented at a restaurant where he had arranged for the proposal to be photographed by society photographers. The wedding was a lavish affair at the Plaza Hotel, attended by 400 guests from Richard's business and social circles. My own friends and family were relegated to a small section, clearly designated as secondary participants in what Richard viewed as primarily a professional networking opportunity and status demonstration. During the early years of our marriage, I maintained the role that Richard expected while carefully building capabilities and resources that he never suspected. My background in international economics and my fluency in 4 languages created opportunities for consulting work with multinational corporations that required discretion and sophisticated analytical capabilities. Richard knew that I occasionally did consulting work, but he viewed these activities as hobbies that provided me with intellectual stimulation, while generating what he assumed were modest supplemental incomes. He never inquired about the specific nature of my work or the compensation involved, apparently satisfied that my activities did not interfere with my primary responsibilities as his wife and social partner. The reality was considerably different. My consulting work involved advising ultra-high net worth individuals and family offices on international tax optimization, currency hedging strategies, and offshore investment structures. This work required absolute confidentiality and generated fees commensurate with the sophisticated financial engineering and discretion involved. Over the course of 12 years, I had built a client base that included technology entrepreneurs, entertainment industry executives, real estate moguls, and inherited wealth families who needed sophisticated strategies for protecting and growing their assets across multiple jurisdictions. My reputation for discretion and technical excellence had created a referral network that generated more opportunities than I could accept. The offshore banking relationships began as professional necessities for serving my clients effectively. Understanding international banking regulations, currency markets, and investment vehicles required maintaining relationships with financial institutions in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and other major offshore financial centers. However, I gradually recognized that these same structures could provide personal financial security and independence that traditional domestic banking relationships could not offer. The ability to maintain assets outside the immediate reach of domestic legal processes or financial manipulation created strategic options that I hoped never to need, but considered prudent to establish. My first personal offshore account was opened in Switzerland through a relationship I had developed while assisting a client with European investment restructuring. The initial deposit was modest, funded through consulting fees that Richard never knew existed because they were paid directly to entities I had established in jurisdictions that provided appropriate privacy protections. The Swiss account grew steadily through reinvestment of consulting income and strategic currency trades that leveraged my understanding of international markets and economic trends. Within 5 years, the account contained sufficient assets to provide complete financial independence, though I continued maintaining the appearance of financial dependence that Richard expected and preferred. The Cayman Islands account was established 2 years later through a different professional relationship, initially intended to support a client's investment activities, but subsequently expanded to include my own asset accumulation strategies. The Cayman structure provided additional privacy protections and investment flexibility that complemented the Swiss arrangement while diversifying jurisdictional risk. By our 10th wedding anniversary, I had accumulated assets across multiple offshore jurisdictions that exceeded 8 figures in value. These assets were held through carefully structured entities that provided legal protection, tax efficiency, and operational flexibility while maintaining complete confidentiality from domestic inquiries or surveillance. Richard remained completely unaware of these arrangements because he never questioned the sources of household management efficiency, travel arrangements, or lifestyle enhancements that I provided through careful application of offshore resources. He assumed that his own income and assets were responsible for our comfortable lifestyle, never recognizing that many of the conveniences and luxuries he enjoyed were actually funded through my independent financial capabilities. The transformation. From financially dependent wife to internationally diversified investor occurred gradually and deliberately over more than a decade. Each consulting engagement provided opportunities to learn about sophisticated financial strategies while building relationships with professionals who could assist with implementation. Each offshore account represented not just asset accumulation, but also strategic preparation for circumstances that I hoped would never occur. However, Richard's behavior during our 14th year of marriage began demonstrating patterns that suggested my strategic preparations might become necessary for protecting both my personal interests and my professional reputation. His attitude toward money and control had evolved from paternalistic to openly manipulative, with increasing emphasis on using financial access as leverage for influencing my decisions and behavior. The credit card incidents began approximately 18 months before our anniversary trip. Richard would occasionally suspend my access to specific accounts or cards when he disapproved of purchases I had made or activities I had planned. These Suspensions were typically brief and accompanied by lectures about fiscal responsibility and appropriate spending priorities. Initially, I accommodated these episodes as temporary inconveniences while focusing on maintaining household harmony and avoiding confrontations that could escalate into more serious conflicts. I had alternative payment methods available through my offshore arrangements, but using them would have revealed financial capabilities that I preferred to keep confidential until circumstances required disclosure. However, the frequency and duration of these financial restrictions increased progressively, suggesting that Richard was testing the boundaries of control and evaluating my responses to different levels of economic pressure. His behavior indicated systematic escalation toward more comprehensive financial manipulation that could eventually threaten both my personal autonomy and my professional activities. The anniversary trip to Santorini represented the culmination of this escalating pattern. Richard had insisted on planning the entire itinerary himself, selecting the resort, arranging transportation, and making all reservations through accounts that he controlled exclusively. When I suggested contributing to the expenses or making some arrangements independently, he dismissed these offers as unnecessary complications that would reduce the surprise and romance of his carefully planned celebration. The trip began with subtle indications that Richard viewed this as an opportunity for demonstrating his financial authority rather than celebrating our marriage partnership. Comments about the expense of our accommodations were consistently directed toward emphasizing his generosity and my dependence on his resources. Conversations about future plans focused on financial limitations that would require careful budgeting and responsible spending behaviors. By the third day of our planned week-long celebration, Richard's comments had evolved into direct statements about financial boundaries and appropriate expectations for future spending patterns. These statements were presented as loving guidance about fiscal responsibility, but their timing and context suggested more strategic purposes related to establishing clearer power dynamics in our relationship. The decisive moment came on Thursday morning when I discovered that all of my credit cards had been suspended overnight. Richard claimed this was a precautionary measure because he had noticed some unusual account activity that required investigation by the bank's security department. He assured me that the situation would be resolved quickly, probably within a few days, and that he would handle all necessary expenses in the meantime. The transparent fiction of this explanation was insulting to someone with my background in international finance and banking operations. Credit card suspensions for security investigations follow specific protocols that do not involve simultaneous suspension of multiple cards from different institutions. The coordination required for Richard's actions indicated deliberate planning, rather than precautionary response to legitimate security concerns. More importantly, Richard's demeanor during this conversation revealed satisfaction and anticipation rather than concern or frustration about inconvenient banking complications. He was clearly expecting this financial restriction to produce specific, behavioral responses from me, probably involving acknowledgement of dependence and gratitude for his continued financial support. That expectation demonstrated the fundamental gap between Richard's perception of our relationship dynamics and the actual balance of power and capability that existed between us. While he was orchestrating what he believed was a demonstration of financial control, he was actually creating the circumstances that would reveal just how completely he had misunderstood both my capabilities and my preparations for exactly this type of situation. The hotel lobby confrontation represented the moment when Richard's financial manipulation strategy collided with the reality of my international asset base and operational independence. His attempt to humiliate me publicly through credit card rejection created the perfect context for demonstrating that his understanding of our financial dynamics was not merely incomplete, but fundamentally inverted. The wire transfer I arranged while Richard watched in stunned silence represented only a small fraction of the liquid assets available through my offshore banking relationships. The $2 million I moved between accounts was sufficient to cover our remaining expenses, plus the penthouse upgrade and extended stay. but it also served as a clear signal that traditional domestic financial restrictions had no effect on my actual operational capabilities. Richard's shock and confusion in that moment reflected his sudden recognition that 15 years of assumed financial authority had been based on completely inaccurate assumptions about my resources and independence. The woman he had attempted to control through credit card manipulation was revealing herself to be someone with international banking relationships and asset bases that made his manipulative games irrelevant. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The decision to send Richard back to New York immediately was not merely punitive, but strategically necessary for beginning the process of establishing clear boundaries and realistic expectations about our future relationship dynamics. His presence during the remainder of the trip would have created ongoing tension and conflict that would interfere with the strategic planning and communication that needed to occur before we returned to our normal domestic environment. The penthouse. Suite upgrades served multiple purposes beyond demonstrating financial capability. The enhanced privacy and space provided appropriate environments for the intensive phone conversations and strategic planning sessions that would be necessary for determining how to proceed with our relationship reconstruction or dissolution. Most importantly, the entire sequence of events created a clear demonstration that Richard's attempt to assert financial control had backfired spectacularly, revealing capabilities and independence that he had never suspected while establishing new baseline expectations for how financial decisions and relationship dynamics would be managed going forward. As I settled into the penthouse suite that evening, overlooking the Aegean Sea from my private terrace, I reflected on how Richard's miscalculation had created the perfect opportunity for transitioning from covert financial independence to open acknowledgement of my actual capabilities and resources. The anniversary trip that was supposed to celebrate our marriage partnership had instead become the catalyst for fundamentally restructuring our relationship on more realistic and equitable terms. The motivational power of this moment lay not in the satisfaction of surprising someone who had underestimated me, but in the recognition that strategic preparation and patient capability building had created options and independence that enabled me to respond to manipulative behavior from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. Richard had spent 15 years assuming that financial control provided him with relationship leverage, never recognizing that his wife had been building international financial independence that made his domestic manipulations irrelevant. The offshore accounts that he never knew existed represented not just asset accumulation, but strategic preparation for maintaining personal autonomy, regardless of external attempts at control or manipulation. The lesson extended beyond personal finance to encompass broader principles of strategic thinking and preparation. Success in complex situations often depends on capabilities and resources that others cannot observe or anticipate. Building these capabilities requires patience, discretion, and long-term perspective that enables effective responses when challenging circumstances arise. The hotel lobby revelation represented the culmination of more than a decade of careful planning and strategic development that had created the foundation for confident action when Richard's behavior finally crossed boundaries that could no longer be accommodated through diplomacy or compromise. The story of how I reached that moment of power and revelation would unfold over the coming days as I used the privacy of the penthouse suite to plan the next phases of this unexpected transition from covert independence to open demonstration of my actual capabilities and resources. Richard's financial manipulation had inadvertently created the perfect catalyst for emerging from the shadows of assumed dependence into the reality of internationally diversified strength. The transformation from Elena Rodriguez, a brilliant economics graduate from Columbia University, into Elena Whitmore, the internationally connected financial strategist who would eventually orchestrate one of the most elegant reversals of financial manipulation in modern relationship dynamics, began long before I ever met Richard Whitmore at that Manhattan charity gala in 2008. My journey toward financial independence and strategic sophistication started during my childhood in Miami, where I witnessed firsthand how economic vulnerability could destroy families and dreams with devastating efficiency. My father, Miguel Rodriguez, had built a successful import-export business connecting Latin American manufacturers with North American distributors. His company, Rodriguez International Trading, employed over 40 people and supported dozens of families throughout the Miami business community. The collapse came swiftly and brutally during the 2001 economic downturn. A series of currency devaluations in key South American markets, combined with tightening credit conditions and increased regulatory scrutiny of international transactions, created perfect storm conditions that destroyed businesses throughout the import-export industry. Companies that had been profitable for decades found themselves unable to manage currency risk, credit exposure, and regulatory compliance simultaneously. My father's business failed not because of poor management or inadequate market demand, but because he had structured his operations without sufficient protection against the systematic risks that could affect entire industries simultaneously. His assets were concentrated in single currency denominations. His credit facilities were tied to domestic banking relationships, and his operational structure provided no flexibility for managing the complex international challenges that emerged. During the crisis, the personal impact on our family was devastating and educational in ways that would shape my entire approach to financial security and strategic planning. We lost our home, our social standing, and most of our personal relationships as the business collapse rippled through every aspect of our lives. My father's health deteriorated under the stress, and my mother was forced to take multiple service jobs to support our basic living expenses. However, the experience also provided crucial insights into how financial systems operated and how sophisticated planning could provide protection against the types of systematic risks that had destroyed our family's security. I observed that other families in our community had weathered the same economic storms because they had diversified their assets across multiple jurisdictions, maintained relationships with international banking institutions, and structured their affairs to provide flexibility during challenging periods. The contrast between families that survived and those that were destroyed by the same economic conditions revealed that financial security depended not merely on earning capacity or asset accumulation, but on sophisticated understanding of systematic risks and strategic preparation for managing those risks effectively. This understanding would become the foundation for everything I would build throughout my professional career. My academic focus during high school and college was driven by determination to understand the economic principles and financial mechanisms that could provide genuine security against the types of risks that had devastated my family. I studied international economics, monetary policy, currency markets, and financial regulation with intensity that my professors found remarkable and occasionally concerning. At Columbia, I specialized in international financial systems and emerging market economics, focusing particularly on the mechanisms through which sophisticated investors protected their assets during periods of economic instability and political uncertainty. My senior thesis analyzed the offshore banking structures used by multinational corporations and ultra-high net worth individuals to manage currency risk, regulatory arbitrage, and asset protection across multiple jurisdictions. The research required for this thesis provided my first introduction to the complex world of international private banking, offshore financial centers, and the sophisticated legal and financial structures that enabled wealthy individuals and institutions to maintain security and flexibility regardless of domestic economic or political conditions. I discovered that the same mechanisms that had enabled some families in Miami to survive the 2001 crisis were available to anyone with sufficient knowledge and resources to implement them effectively. More importantly, I learned that the expertise required for implementing these structures was in high demand among individuals and families who needed sophisticated financial advice, but required absolute discretion and confidentiality. The combination of technical knowledge, linguistic capabilities, and cultural understanding that I had developed through my academic work and personal background created unique qualifications for serving this specialized market. My first professional position after graduation was with Morgan Stanley's Private Wealth Management Division, where I worked as an analyst supporting relationship managers who served ultra-high net worth clients with complex international financial needs. This position provided exposure to the practical implementation of sophisticated financial strategies while building relationships with professionals throughout the international banking and investment management industries. The work involved analyzing client portfolios that often included assets across dozens of jurisdictions, managed through structures that incorporated trusts, corporations, partnerships, and other entities designed to optimize tax efficiency, asset protection, and operational flexibility. Each client situation required unique approaches that balanced regulatory compliance, investment performance, and privacy protection in ways that addressed their specific circumstances and objectives. The educational value of this position extended far beyond technical financial analysis to include understanding of client psychology, relationship management, and the cultural and personal factors that influenced sophisticated financial decision-making. I observed how successful wealth management required not just technical expertise, but also ability to understand client motivations, concerns, and long-term objectives that might not be explicitly stated during formal meetings. Most importantly, I learned that many clients' most significant financial decisions were driven by relationship dynamics, family circumstances, and personal security concerns that required careful attention and sophisticated strategic thinking. The clients who achieved the best outcomes were those who planned proactively for various scenarios rather than simply reacting to immediate circumstances. After 3 years at Morgan Stanley, I transitioned to independent consulting work that enabled me to serve clients more flexibly while building the specialized expertise and international relationships that would become the foundation for my eventual personal financial independence. My consulting practice focused on clients who needed sophisticated analysis and strategic planning, but preferred working with boutique advisors rather than large institutional providers. The transition to independent practice required developing new capabilities in business development, client relationship management, and operational infrastructure that complemented my technical financial expertise. I established my first corporate entity, Rodriguez Financial Consulting LLC, and began building the professional relationships and reputation that would support sustainable consulting practice. The early years of independent consulting were challenging, but educational in ways that proved crucial for my long-term success. I learned to identify client needs that were not being addressed effectively by larger institutions, to develop customized solutions that provided genuine value, and to build trust relationships that resulted in ongoing engagements and referral opportunities. My first major consulting engagement came through a referral from a former Morgan Stanley colleague who had moved to a family office serving technology entrepreneurs. The client was a software company founder who had recently completed a successful exit transaction and needed guidance on structuring his investment portfolio to minimize tax exposure while maintaining liquidity for future investment opportunities. The engagement required analyzing his existing financial structure, researching international investment options, and coordinating with legal and tax professionals to implement optimization strategies that addressed his specific objectives. The successful completion of this project resulted in substantial cost savings for the client, while providing me with credibility and experience that attracted additional opportunities. Over the following 2 years, my consulting practice grew through referrals to include entertainment industry clients, real estate investors, and inherited wealth families who needed specialized expertise for managing complex international financial structures. Each engagement provided opportunities to learn about different aspects of sophisticated wealth management, while building relationships with professionals throughout the international financial services industry. The offshore banking relationships that would eventually provide my personal financial independence began as professional necessities for serving my clients effectively. Understanding how international banking systems operated required maintaining relationships with institutions, in key financial centers and staying current with regulatory developments that could affect client strategies. My first personal banking relationship outside the United States was established with Credit Suisse in Geneva through a professional contact I had developed while assisting a client with European investment restructuring. The initial account was opened primarily for operational convenience, enabling me to manage client transactions more efficiently while providing first-hand experience with international banking services. However, I gradually recognized that the same banking relationships and financial structures that benefited my clients could provide personal advantages in terms of asset protection, investment flexibility, and privacy protection that domestic banking relationships could not offer. The ability to maintain assets outside the immediate jurisdiction of domestic legal and regulatory systems created strategic options that could prove valuable in various personal circumstances. My first significant personal deposit to the Swiss account was made using consulting fees from a project that involved restructuring investments for a family office client who preferred to maintain confidentiality about the specific nature of their holdings. The fees were paid directly to an entity I had established in Delaware, which then transferred funds to Switzerland through legitimate international banking channels. The offshore asset accumulation strategy that would eventually provide complete financial independence developed gradually through reinvestment of consulting income and strategic currency trading that leveraged my understanding of international economic trends and market dynamics. Each successful investment increased both my personal financial security and my credibility with clients who valued working with advisors who understood sophisticated financial strategies through personal experience. The Cayman Islands banking relationship was established during my 4th year of independent consulting through a connection I had developed while assisting a private equity client with fund structure optimization. The Cayman account provided additional diversification and operational flexibility that complemented the Swiss arrangement, while offering different regulatory protections and investment options. By the time I met Richard Whitmore at the charity gala in 2008, I had established a successful independent consulting practice that generated substantial income while building an international asset base that provided complete financial independence. However, I had also learned the importance of discretion and privacy in financial matters, particularly when dealing with individuals who might not understand or appreciate the sophisticated strategies involved. Richard's initial attraction to me was clearly based on his perception of elegant sophistication, combined with apparent availability for the type of relationship that would complement his social and professional ambitions. During our early conversations, he demonstrated the combination of financial success and conventional thinking that suggested he would be comfortable with traditional relationship dynamics where his income and assets provided the primary foundation for our lifestyle. I found Richard intellectually interesting and socially compatible, but I also recognized that his conventional approach to money and relationships reflected limited understanding of the sophisticated financial strategies and international opportunities that had become central to my professional and personal life. His success in investment banking had been built through traditional career advancement rather than entrepreneurial initiative or strategic innovation. The decision to maintain discretion about my financial capabilities and consulting practice during our courtship and early marriage was based on several strategic considerations. Richard clearly preferred relationships where his financial success provided primary security and status, and disrupting this preference could create unnecessary tension and conflict that might undermine relationship development. More importantly, my consulting clients required absolute confidentiality about their financial affairs, and maintaining appropriate boundaries between personal and professional relationships was essential for preserving the trust and discretion that enabled my practice to succeed. Revealing the scope of my consulting work or the nature of my client relationships could compromise professional obligations that were fundamental to my career success. The decision also reflected my understanding that financial disclosure in relationships should be mutual and appropriate to the level of commitment and shared responsibility involved. During courtship and early marriage, Richard never inquired about my financial resources or consulting income in ways that suggested genuine interest in shared financial planning or partnership approaches to money management. His attitude toward my consulting work was patronizing, but not intrusive, treating it as intellectual hobby that provided me with personal satisfaction while generating what he assumed were modest supplemental incomes. This attitude enabled me to continue building my international consulting practice and offshore asset base without creating relationship conflicts or compromising professional confidentiality. The foundation years of our marriage established patterns of financial independence and professional discretion that would prove crucial when Richard's behavior eventually evolved toward manipulation and control. The consulting practice continued, growing through referrals and reputation building, while the offshore accounts accumulated assets through reinvestment and strategic trading that Richard never observed or questioned. Each successful consulting engagement strengthened my professional reputation, while building relationships with sophisticated financial professionals throughout the international banking and investment management industries. These relationships provided not only business opportunities, but also strategic advice and support that enhanced my personal financial management capabilities. The offshore banking relationships evolved from operational conveniences into comprehensive wealth management partnerships that provided sophisticated investment options, currency hedging strategies, and asset protection mechanisms that created genuine financial security, independent of domestic economic or political conditions. By our 10th wedding anniversary, I had built an international financial infrastructure that provided complete independence while maintaining the appearance of conventional marriage dynamics that Richard expected and preferred. The consulting practice generated substantial income that was largely invisible to domestic observation, while the offshore accounts had accumulated assets that exceeded most people's lifetime earnings. The foundation years had established not just financial independence, but also the professional relationships, strategic expertise, and international infrastructure that would enable confident response to any attempt at financial manipulation or relationship control. Richard's eventual miscalculation in Santorini would reveal capabilities that had been building systematically for more than 15 years, creating one of the most elegant demonstrations of how strategic preparation can transform apparent vulnerability into unassailable strength. The motivational power of these foundation years demonstrates how early experiences of financial vulnerability can become catalysts for building extraordinary security and independence through strategic thinking, systematic preparation, and patient execution, rather than accepting conventional limitations or traditional relationship dynamics. The foundation years show how sophisticated financial planning can create options and capabilities that provide genuine freedom and security, regardless of external circumstances or other people's expectations. The shift from marital harmony to systematic control emerged so gradually that I initially attributed individual incidents to stress, miscommunication, or temporary circumstances, rather than recognizing them as components of a deliberate strategy designed to establish financial dominance through incremental boundary testing and psychological manipulation. The first indication appeared during our 7th year of marriage, when Richard began making unilateral decisions about household financial management that he presented as efficiency improvements, but actually represented the initial steps toward centralizing monetary control under his exclusive authority. These changes began with seemingly reasonable suggestions about consolidating accounts to simplify administrative tasks and improve coordination between our various financial obligations and investment strategies. Richard proposed that we merge our individual checking accounts into a single joint account that would streamline bill payments, reduce banking fees, and provide better oversight of household expenses. His presentation emphasized practical benefits and administrative convenience, while framing the consolidation as a natural evolution of our financial partnership that would enhance coordination and eliminate redundant account management activities. The proposal seemed logical on the surface, particularly since I maintained separate accounts for consulting income that were not affected by the household consolidation. However, The implementation process revealed aspects of Richard's thinking that suggested motivations beyond administrative efficiency and practical convenience. During the account consolidation process, Richard insisted on establishing himself as the primary account holder with exclusive authority over account management, check ordering, and online banking access. When I questioned why both names could not have equal authority, he explained that banking institutions preferred single points of contact for account administration, and that his established relationship with the bank would facilitate smoother processing of our consolidated arrangements. This explanation contained enough truth to seem reasonable while obscuring the control implications of the proposed structure. Banking institutions do often prefer simplified account management, and Richard's existing relationship with the bank could facilitate the consolidation process. However, the insistence on exclusive administrative authority represented a significant change from our previous arrangements, where both of us maintained independent access to our respective accounts. The second indication emerged 3 months later, when Richard began expressing concerns about my consulting practice that he framed as professional advice intended to help me optimize my business development and client relationship strategies. These discussions initially focused on operational efficiency and revenue enhancement, rather than fundamental questions about the nature or scope of my professional activities. Richard suggested that I could improve my consulting practice by focusing on fewer clients with larger engagements, rather than maintaining relationships with multiple smaller clients who required significant time investment for relatively modest returns. He argued that consolidating my client base would reduce administrative overhead while increasing hourly compensation rates and improving work-life balance for our marriage relationship. The suggestion contained strategic merit that made it difficult to dismiss entirely. Consulting practices often benefit from client consolidation that reduces administrative complexity while increasing average engagement values. However, Richard's specific recommendations revealed limited understanding of the confidentiality requirements, relationship dynamics, and strategic considerations that actually drove success in sophisticated financial consulting. More concerning, his advice consistently emphasized approaches that would reduce the privacy and operational independence that were essential for serving my existing client base effectively. His suggestions would have required disclosing client relationships, standardizing service offerings, and centralizing administrative processes in ways that could compromise the discretion and flexibility that distinguished my practice from larger institutional competitors. When I explained the confidentiality constraints and relationship management considerations that made his suggestions impractical, Richard expressed frustration about what he characterized as unnecessarily complex business practices that prevented optimization of obvious efficiency opportunities. His response suggested that he viewed my explanations as resistance to helpful advice, rather than legitimate professional requirements. The third indication occurred during our 8th year, when Richard began requesting detailed information about my consulting income and client relationships that he presented as necessary for comprehensive financial planning and tax optimization strategies. These requests initially focused on aggregate income figures and general business categories, rather than specific client identities or engagement details. Richard explained that effective financial planning required understanding all income sources and their stability characteristics to develop appropriate investment strategies and retirement planning approaches. He argued that my consulting income had become sufficiently significant to warrant integration with our overall financial strategy, rather than treatment as supplemental income that could be managed independently. The request seemed reasonable from a financial planning perspective, particularly since consulting income had indeed grown substantially over the previous several years. However, the specific information Richard requested went beyond what was necessary for financial planning purposes and included details that could compromise client confidentiality and professional relationships. When I provided aggregate income figures while explaining that client-specific details were protected by confidentiality agreements, Richard expressed skepticism about the necessity of such extensive privacy protections for what he characterized as routine business consulting services. His response revealed assumptions about my consulting practice that were both inaccurate and potentially damaging to client relationships. The pattern that emerged through these incidents involved progressive testing of boundaries related to financial information, professional autonomy, and decision-making authority within our marriage relationship. Each individual request or suggestion seemed reasonable when considered in isolation, but the cumulative effect was to establish precedents for increasing Richard's influence over areas that had previously been within my independent control. The psychological dynamics underlying this pattern became clearer during our 9th year, when Richard's comments about money and financial responsibility began including subtle criticisms of my spending patterns and financial priorities that he presented as loving guidance intended to help me develop better fiscal discipline and strategic thinking about resource allocation. These conversations typically occurred in contexts where Richard would praise my intelligence and professional capabilities while expressing concern about what he characterized as emotional or impulsive financial decisions that could undermine our long-term financial security and retirement planning objectives. The structure of these discussions made it difficult to object without appearing defensive or resistant to constructive feedback. Richard would cite specific purchases or expenses that he considered questionable, explaining how alternative choices could have achieved similar outcomes while preserving resources for more important priorities. His examples were carefully selected to highlight spending that could be characterized as discretionary or lifestyle-related, rather than essential or investment-oriented. The critique process was sophisticated in its psychological construction, combining validation of my professional capabilities with expressions of concern about specific behaviors that suggested need for guidance and improvement. This approach made direct confrontation difficult because it required challenging both the factual accuracy of his observations and the loving intentions that he claimed motivated his feedback. However, the pattern of criticism revealed systematic misunderstanding of my actual financial position and resource allocation strategies. Richard's concerns were based on his observation of expenses paid through joint accounts and credit cards that he monitored, without awareness of the offshore income and assets that actually funded many of the purchases he considered problematic. The spending that Richard characterized as impulsive or excessive was actually carefully planned and funded through resources that provided complete financial security independent of our joint financial arrangements. His criticism revealed that he was evaluating my financial behavior based on incomplete information, while assuming authority to guide my decision-making based on his partial understanding of our overall financial situation. The fourth significant indication emerged during our 10th year, when Richard began implementing what he characterized as enhanced financial coordination procedures that would improve communication about major expenses and ensure appropriate consultation before significant financial commitments were made by either party. These procedures required advanced discussion of any individual expense exceeding specific thresholds, with different limits applying to different categories of spending. Essential expenses such as housing, transportation, and healthcare required consultation for amounts above $5,000, while discretionary expenses such as travel, entertainment, and personal purchases required discussion for amounts exceeding $1,000. Richard presented these procedures as mutual accountability measures that would benefit both of us by ensuring better communication and shared decision-making about financial priorities. He emphasized that the requirements applied equally to both parties and were intended to enhance coordination rather than restrict individual autonomy or spending authority. However, the implementation of these procedures revealed asymmetries that suggested different objectives than the mutual accountability that Richard had described. The threshold amounts were structured in ways that would affect my spending patterns significantly more than his, since his individual expenses tended to be larger and less frequent, while mine were more numerous but typically smaller in amount. More importantly, the consultation requirements were applied more rigorously to my expenses than to his, with detailed questioning about necessity, alternatives, and timing for purchases that Richard considered discretionary. When I applied similar scrutiny to his expenses, he expressed frustration about excessive administrative overhead that interfered with efficient decision-making for obvious business necessities. The pattern of differential application became particularly apparent with respect to business-related expenses, where Richard's work-related costs were presumed legitimate, while my consulting practice expenses were subjected to detailed analysis, and frequently questioned regarding necessity and cost-effectiveness. These disparities revealed that the enhanced coordination procedures were actually mechanisms for increasing Richard's oversight of my financial activities while preserving his own spending autonomy. The mutual accountability framework provided plausible justification for implementing controls that were designed to affect my behavior rather than establishing genuinely reciprocal limitations. The recognition of this pattern marked a crucial transition in my understanding of Richard's intentions and the strategic implications for our marriage relationship. The individual incidents that I had initially attributed to stress, miscommunication, or temporary circumstances were actually components of a systematic campaign to establish financial control through incremental boundary expansion and psychological manipulation. The sophistication of Richard's approach reflected his professional background in investment banking, where success often depended on identifying and exploiting informational asymmetries and psychological vulnerabilities in negotiations and client relationships. The techniques he was applying within our marriage were similar to those used in professional contexts to establish advantageous positions and influence decision-making processes. However, Richard's strategy was based on fundamental miscalculations about my actual financial position, professional capabilities, and strategic preparedness for managing attempts at relationship control. His efforts were focused on controlling resources and decision-making processes that represented only a small portion of my overall financial capabilities and strategic options. The offshore banking relationships and international consulting practice that provided my genuine financial independence were completely outside Richard's awareness and influence. His control mechanisms were directed toward joint accounts and domestic expenses that were largely funded by his income, while my primary assets and income sources remained invisible to his monitoring and manipulation efforts. The pattern recognition phase enabled me to understand that Richard's behavior was likely to escalate toward more comprehensive control attempts as he gained confidence in his ability to influence my financial activities and decision-making processes. The incremental approach he was using typically progressed toward more direct and extensive control measures once initial boundaries had been successfully established. This understanding required strategic decisions about how to respond to Richard's control attempts while protecting my professional relationships, maintaining operational security for my consulting practice, and preserving the financial independence that provided genuine security regardless of relationship developments. The options ranged from direct confrontation about Richard's behavior to subtle resistance that would limit his control expansion without revealing the full scope of my financial capabilities and strategic preparations. Each approach involved different risks and potential outcomes that needed to be evaluated carefully before committing to specific response strategies. The pattern recognition phase also revealed the importance of documenting Richard's behavior systematically to create objective records of his control attempts and their escalation over time. This documentation could prove valuable for various purposes, including professional counseling, legal consultation, or relationship negotiation processes that might become necessary if his behavior continued expanding. Most importantly, the recognition of systematic manipulation attempts enabled me to understand that Richard's behavior reflected fundamental changes in his attitude toward our marriage relationship that were unlikely to be resolved through communication, compromise, or accommodation. His approach suggested strategic objectives that were incompatible with genuine partnership and mutual respect. The pattern recognition phase concluded with my understanding that Richard's financial control attempts were likely to continue escalating until they encountered effective resistance or achieved their apparent objectives of establishing his authority over our household financial management and my professional activities. The strategic question was not whether to resist these attempts, but how to resist them most effectively while preserving my long-term interests and capabilities. The motivational significance of this pattern recognition phase demonstrates how systematic observation and analytical thinking can reveal manipulation attempts that might otherwise succeed through incremental boundary expansion and psychological pressure. Rather than accepting individual incidents as isolated problems or personal failings, the pattern recognition approach enabled strategic understanding of complex manipulation campaigns that required coordinated responses. The phase also illustrates how professional analytical skills can be applied to personal relationship challenges, providing objective frameworks for understanding complex interpersonal dynamics that might otherwise be confused by emotional reactions or social expectations. The same analytical capabilities that supported sophisticated financial consulting practice proved essential for recognizing and preparing to address systematic relationship manipulation. The foundation established during this pattern recognition phase would prove crucial for the strategic planning and response development that would eventually enable the elegant reversal of Richard's control attempts during our anniversary trip to Santorini. Understanding the scope and sophistication of his manipulation strategy was essential for developing countermeasures that would be equally sophisticated and ultimately more effective than his efforts to establish financial dominance within our relationship. The recognition of Richard's systematic manipulation campaign necessitated immediate expansion of my knowledge base beyond international finance and consulting practice into specialized areas of relationship psychology, legal protection strategies, and strategic communication techniques that would be essential for developing effective countermeasures to his increasingly sophisticated control attempts. The complexity of addressing relationship manipulation while preserving professional obligations, maintaining operational security for my consulting practice, and protecting the financial independence that provided genuine security required understanding of multiple disciplines that extended far beyond my existing expertise in economics, banking, and investment management. My educational strategy focused on 3 primary areas that would be essential for comprehensive response planning. First, I needed to understand the psychological principles underlying manipulation and control behavior, including the progression patterns that typically characterized such campaigns and the most effective resistance strategies available to targeted individuals. Second, I required detailed knowledge of legal frameworks governing marital relationships, asset protection, and privacy rights that could provide formal protections if Richard's behavior continued escalating. Third, I needed to develop sophisticated communication and negotiation capabilities that would enable effective management of confrontational situations while preserving relationships and protecting strategic interests. The psychological education component began with intensive research into coercive control patterns and the specific techniques commonly employed by individuals seeking to establish dominance within intimate relationships. This research revealed that Richard's approach followed established patterns documented extensively in psychological literature, suggesting that his behavior was likely to continue escalating in predictable ways unless effectively countered. The academic literature on intimate partner control revealed sophisticated understanding of the incremental boundary testing, financial manipulation, and isolation tactics that Richard had been implementing throughout our relationship. These techniques were designed to establish psychological dependence while reducing the target's ability to recognize manipulation or develop effective resistance strategies. The research also revealed that financial control represented one of the most effective manipulation tools because it created practical limitations on the target's ability to maintain independence or leave the relationship if circumstances became intolerable. The systematic nature of Richard's financial control attempts suggested awareness of these dynamics and strategic application of documented manipulation techniques. However, the literature also provided frameworks for understanding manipulation, resistance, and the development of strategic responses that could neutralize control attempts while preserving personal autonomy and relationship stability. The most effective resistance strategies typically involved maintaining independent resources, building support networks, and developing clear communication about boundaries and expectations. The academic foundation enabled me to understand that, My offshore banking relationships and international consulting practice provided precisely the types of independent resources that psychological research identified as most effective for maintaining autonomy during manipulation campaigns. My strategic preparations had inadvertently created optimal conditions for resisting Richard's control attempts. The legal education component required understanding of matrimonial law, asset protection strategies, and privacy rights that could provide formal protections if Richard's behavior required legal intervention or if our relationship needed to be restructured through formal processes. This education encompassed both domestic law in New York State and international legal frameworks governing offshore banking and asset protection structures. New York matrimonial law provided specific protections for individual property rights and established frameworks for addressing financial misconduct within marriage relationships. The state's equitable distribution principles meant that marital assets would be divided fairly, but not necessarily equally, with consideration given to individual contributions, economic circumstances, and conduct during the marriage relationship. However, the most significant legal protections were provided by the offshore legal structures that governed my banking relationships and consulting practice operations. These structures had been established in jurisdictions that provided strong privacy protections and limited disclosure requirements, creating legal barriers that would prevent unauthorized access to my financial information or assets. The Swiss EOF. Banking relationships were governed by bank secrecy laws that provided criminal penalties for unauthorized disclosure of client information, while the Cayman Islands structures were protected by privacy legislation that restricted foreign legal proceedings and asset seizure attempts. These protections created comprehensive barriers against financial investigation or control attempts that might be pursued through domestic legal processes. The legal research also revealed that my consulting practice structure provided additional protections through attorney-client privilege relationships with legal counsel in multiple jurisdictions, professional confidentiality obligations to clients, and corporate governance frameworks that separated business operations from personal, financial arrangements. The combination of domestic legal protections and international privacy frameworks created multiple layers of legal security that would enable effective resistance to any attempt at financial control or manipulation through legal intimidation. Richard's background in investment banking provided him with sophisticated understanding of domestic financial systems, but limited awareness of international legal protections that could neutralize traditional control mechanisms. The communication and negotiation education component focused on developing capabilities for managing confrontational discussions while maintaining professional composure and achieving strategic objectives. This education encompassed both theoretical frameworks from negotiation literature and practical techniques for managing high-stakes conversations with individuals who might be employing manipulation or intimidation tactics. The academic literature on strategic negotiation provided frameworks for understanding power dynamics, information asymmetries, and psychological factors that influenced negotiation outcomes. These frameworks revealed that successful negotiation often depended more on preparation, information control, and strategic patience than on aggressive tactics or emotional pressure. The research also emphasized the importance of maintaining strategic clarity about objectives, alternatives, and acceptable outcomes before entering confrontational situations. Negotiation success typically required understanding of all parties' interests, constraints, and strategic options, with particular attention to identifying leverage points that could influence final outcomes. However, the most valuable insights came from literature on managing negotiations with individuals who employed manipulation or bad faith tactics. These situations required special attention to documentation, witness presence, and communication techniques that could neutralize manipulation attempts while maintaining focus on substantive issues and strategic objectives. The practical application of these communication principles required extensive practice through role-playing exercises and scenario development that prepared me for various confrontational situations that might arise as Richard's behavior continued evolving. These exercises addressed different escalation scenarios, from routine financial discussions through potential crisis situations involving legal intervention or relationship termination. The scenario planning process revealed that successful confrontation management would require extraordinary emotional discipline, combined with comprehensive preparation that anticipated Richard's likely responses and developed strategic counters for each possibility. The complexity of managing sophisticated manipulation attempts while preserving strategic advantages demanded capabilities that extended far beyond normal relationship communication skills. The educational process also included consultation with specialized professionals who could provide expert guidance on specific aspects of the strategic challenges I was facing. These consultations required careful discretion to protect confidentiality, while obtaining sufficient information for effective planning and preparation. My first consultation was with Dr. Sarah Chen, a clinical psychologist who specialized in coercive control patterns and therapeutic intervention strategies for individuals experiencing relationship manipulation. Our sessions focused on understanding the psychological dynamics underlying Richard's behavior, while developing personal resilience strategies that would enable effective response without compromising my emotional stability or professional capabilities. Dr. Chen's analysis confirmed that Richard's behavior followed established patterns of financial control and psychological manipulation that typically escalated over time unless effectively confronted. She emphasized that individuals with Richard's professional background and personality characteristics often possessed sophisticated understanding of psychological pressure techniques that could be highly effective against unprepared targets. However, she also noted that my professional background, financial independence, and strategic awareness provided unusual advantages for managing manipulation attempts. The key to successful resistance would be maintaining emotional discipline, while systematically implementing countermeasures that neutralized Richard's control mechanisms without creating unnecessary confrontation or relationship damage. The therapeutic framework provided valuable techniques for managing stress, maintaining perspective, and preserving emotional equilibrium during challenging confrontational situations. These capabilities would prove essential for maintaining professional performance and strategic clarity throughout whatever confrontational processes might become necessary. My second consultation was with Rebecca Martinez, a family law attorney who specialized in high-asset divorce cases and marital, financial disputes. Our discussions focused on understanding legal options and protections available if Richard's behavior required formal intervention, or if our relationship needed to be restructured through legal processes. Rebecca's analysis revealed that my offshore financial structures provided exceptional protection against traditional asset seizure or control attempts that were commonly employed in matrimonial disputes. The international legal frameworks governing these structures created barriers that would be extremely difficult and expensive for Richard to challenge through domestic legal proceedings. She also confirmed that Richard's financial manipulation attempts could provide grounds for favorable treatment in any potential divorce proceedings, particularly if his behavior could be documented systematically and presented as evidence of bad faith conduct within the marriage relationship. The legal consultation process provided confidence that formal protections were available if necessary, while emphasizing the importance of comprehensive documentation and strategic preparation before any confrontational situations arose. The legal framework provided important backstop protections while confirming that my strategic preparations had created optimal conditions for managing relationship challenges. My third consultation was with Thomas Anderson, a strategic communications consultant who specialized in crisis management and high-stakes negotiation situations. Our sessions focused on developing practical communication techniques for managing confrontational discussions while maintaining strategic advantages and achieving specific objectives. Thomas's expertise in managing complex communication situations provided frameworks for understanding how information control, timing, and psychological pressure could be employed strategically during confrontational negotiations. His guidance, emphasized the importance of maintaining strategic initiative while avoiding reactive responses that could undermine negotiating positions. The communication training included extensive practice with difficult conversation scenarios, stress management techniques, and strategic messaging approaches that could neutralize manipulation attempts while advancing specific objectives. These capabilities would prove essential for managing whatever confrontational situations might arise as Richard's behavior continued evolving. The educational phase also included intensive study of Richard's professional background, personality characteristics, and strategic capabilities that would influence his likely responses to various countermeasures or confrontational approaches. Understanding his strengths, weaknesses, and typical behavior patterns was essential for developing effective strategic responses. Richard's investment banking background provided him with sophisticated understanding of financial systems, negotiation, tactics, and psychological pressure techniques that were commonly employed in professional contexts. His success in competitive business environments suggested strong analytical capabilities and strategic thinking that would require careful consideration in any confrontational situation. However, his professional success had also been achieved within structured environments where established rules and procedures provided frameworks for managing complex situations. His experience with relationship dynamics and personal confrontations was likely to be more limited than his professional capabilities might suggest. The personality analysis revealed characteristics that suggested probable responses to various strategic approaches. Richard's need for control and social status suggested that public confrontation or reputation threats could be particularly effective leverage points. His confidence in his financial expertise suggested that demonstrating superior knowledge or capabilities could create significant psychological impact. The comprehensive educational preparation provided understanding of manipulation psychology, legal protections, communication strategies, and individual personality factors that would be essential for developing effective countermeasures to Richard's increasing control attempts. The educational foundation created confidence that sophisticated, strategic responses were both feasible and likely to be effective. The educational phase concluded with the recognition that Richard's manipulation campaign was based on fundamental miscalculations about my capabilities, resources, and strategic preparedness. His control attempts were focused on traditional, domestic financial mechanisms while remaining completely unaware of the international financial infrastructure that provided genuine independence and security. The strategic education had revealed that the offshore banking relationships and consulting practice that Richard dismissed as minor supplemental activities actually provided comprehensive protection against all traditional forms of financial manipulation or control. His efforts to establish dominance were directed toward resources that represented only a small fraction of my actual financial capabilities. More importantly, the educational process had provided frameworks for understanding that Richard's behavior was likely to continue escalating until it encountered effective resistance or achieved its apparent objectives. The strategic choice was not whether to resist his control attempts, but how to resist them most effectively while preserving long-term interests and relationships. The educational foundation established during this phase would prove essential for the strategic planning and alliance building that would eventually enable the comprehensive response demonstrated during our anniversary trip to Santorini. The knowledge and capabilities developed through systematic educational preparation created the foundation for confident strategic action when Richard's behavior finally crossed boundaries that could no longer be accommodated through patience or diplomacy. The motivational significance of this educational phase demonstrates how strategic learning and professional development can provide capabilities for addressing complex personal challenges that extend far beyond immediate career or financial objectives. The same analytical and strategic thinking skills that supported sophisticated consulting practice proved essential for managing relationship manipulation and developing effective countermeasures. The phase also illustrates how comprehensive Preparation and systematic education can transform apparent vulnerabilities into strategic advantages when challenging circumstances arise. Rather than accepting manipulation attempts or hoping for favorable outcomes, the educational approach enabled development of sophisticated responses based on thorough understanding of relevant principles and strategic options. The comprehensive education in manipulation psychology, legal protections, and strategic communication had provided essential knowledge foundations, but implementing effective countermeasures to Richard's escalating control campaign required building a sophisticated network of professional relationships and personal alliances that could provide specialized expertise, objective perspective, and practical support when confrontational situations arose. The alliance-building process demanded careful consideration of confidentiality requirements, mutual benefit structures, and strategic timing that would enable effective coordination without compromising operational security or revealing strategic intentions prematurely. Each potential alliance relationship required evaluation of trustworthiness, capability, and alignment with my long-term strategic objectives. The professional alliance network needed to encompass legal counsel, financial advisory services, strategic, consulting capabilities, and specialized expertise in areas ranging from international banking regulations to crisis communication management. These relationships would provide essential technical support while creating credibility and leverage that could prove crucial during high-stakes confrontational situations. The personal alliance network required identifying individuals who understood relationship dynamics, could provide emotional support during challenging periods, and possess the discretion necessary for maintaining confidentiality about sensitive strategic planning activities. These relationships would provide psychological resilience and perspective that would be essential for maintaining strategic clarity during emotionally challenging confrontational processes. My first strategic alliance was established with Margaret Sinclair, a senior partner at Cromwell and Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious family law firms, specializing in high-asset matrimonial disputes and complex financial arrangements involving international structures. Margaret's reputation for discretion and strategic sophistication made her an ideal advisor for developing legal frameworks that could protect my interests while preserving operational flexibility for my consulting practice and offshore financial arrangements. Our initial consultation revealed that Margaret possessed exceptional understanding of the legal complexities surrounding international asset protection structures and the strategic considerations involved in managing matrimonial disputes where one party maintained substantial undisclosed resources. Her experience with similar cases provided valuable insights into effective approaches for managing legal challenges while preserving privacy and financial security. Margaret's analysis confirmed that my offshore banking relationships and consulting practice structure provided comprehensive legal protections against traditional asset seizure or disclosure attempts that were commonly employed in matrimonial litigation. The international legal frameworks governing these arrangements created multiple layers of protection that would require extraordinary legal resources and expertise for Richard to challenge effectively. However, she emphasized that maintaining these protections would require careful adherence to documentation requirements, regulatory compliance obligations, and strategic communication protocols that could prevent inadvertent disclosure or legal challenges based on procedural violations. The sophisticated nature of my financial arrangements required equally sophisticated legal management to preserve their protective benefits. The legal alliance provided immediate strategic value through comprehensive review of my existing structures and identification of potential vulnerabilities that could be addressed proactively before confrontational situations arose. Margaret's guidance enabled optimization of my legal protections, while establishing protocols for managing any future legal challenges that Richard might attempt to pursue. My second strategic alliance was developed with David Kim, a managing director at Goldman Sachs Private Wealth Management, who specialized in serving ultra-high net worth individuals with complex international financial needs. David's expertise in sophisticated investment strategies and international banking relationships provided valuable perspective on optimizing my financial arrangements while maintaining operational security and strategic flexibility. Our professional relationship had begun several years earlier when David provided advisory services for one of my consulting clients, but the alliance was formalized through a comprehensive wealth management engagement that enabled systematic optimization of my offshore investment strategies while creating additional layers of financial protection and operational capability. David's analysis revealed opportunities for enhancing the performance and security of my international financial arrangements through diversification strategies, currency hedging techniques, and investment structures that could provide improved returns while maintaining the privacy and flexibility that were essential for my strategic objectives. The Wealth Management Alliance also provided access to Goldman Sachs's international network of banking relationships and investment opportunities that could enhance my financial capabilities while creating additional operational flexibility for managing complex situations. The institutional credibility and resources provided by this relationship would prove valuable for various strategic purposes. Most importantly, David's understanding of sophisticated financial strategies and international banking operations provided objective validation of my financial arrangements and strategic capabilities. His professional assessment confirmed that my offshore financial infrastructure provided genuine independence and security that exceeded what most individuals could achieve through traditional domestic financial planning approaches. My third strategic alliance was established with Dr. Patricia Reynolds, a clinical psychologist who specialized in executive coaching and strategic decision-making for high-performing individuals facing complex personal and professional challenges. Patricia's expertise in cognitive psychology and strategic thinking provided valuable frameworks for managing the emotional and psychological aspects of confrontational situations while maintaining strategic clarity and decision-making effectiveness. Our coaching relationship focused on developing psychological resilience, stress management techniques, and strategic communication capabilities that would enable effective performance during high-pressure confrontational situations. Patricia's guidance addressed both the tactical aspects of managing difficult conversations and the strategic considerations involved in achieving specific objectives while preserving relationships and reputation. The Psychological Alliance provided essential support for maintaining emotional equilibrium and strategic perspective during the increasingly challenging dynamics with Richard. Patricia's expertise enabled development of sophisticated approaches for managing manipulation attempts while preserving psychological health and strategic effectiveness. Her analysis of Richard's behavioral patterns provided valuable insights into his likely responses to various strategic approaches and the psychological vulnerabilities that could be leveraged during confrontational situations. Understanding his personality characteristics and typical behavior patterns was essential for developing effective countermeasures and negotiation strategies. My fourth strategic alliance was developed with James Mitchell, a senior executive at Kroll Associates who specialized in corporate intelligence and risk management for high-profile individuals and organizations facing complex security challenges. James's expertise in information security, threat assessment, and strategic protection provided valuable capabilities for managing the operational security aspects of my strategic planning and implementation activities. The Intelligence Alliance focused on developing comprehensive security protocols for protecting confidential information, monitoring potential threats to my strategic interests, and creating contingency plans for managing various escalation scenarios that might arise as Richard's behavior continued evolving. James's analysis revealed potential vulnerabilities in my operational security arrangements and provided recommendations for enhancing protection of sensitive information while maintaining operational effectiveness for my consulting practice and personal financial management activities. His guidance addressed both technological security measures and procedural protocols for managing confidential information safely. The Security Alliance also provided access to investigative capabilities that could be employed if Richard's behavior escalated to levels requiring detailed intelligence about his activities, associations, or strategic planning. While such capabilities were not immediately necessary, their availability provided strategic options that could prove valuable if confrontational situations intensified. My fifth strategic alliance was established with Catherine Walsh, a former senior diplomat who had transitioned to private consulting work specializing in high-stakes negotiation and crisis communication for individuals and organizations facing complex reputational and relationship challenges. Catherine's expertise in strategic communication and conflict resolution provided valuable capabilities for managing confrontational situations while preserving relationships and achieving strategic objectives. Our consulting relationship focused on developing sophisticated communication strategies for various confrontational scenarios that might arise with Richard, ranging from routine financial discussions through potential crisis situations involving public disclosure or legal intervention. Catherine's guidance addressed both tactical communication techniques and strategic messaging approaches that could influence outcomes favorably. The diplomatic alliance provided frameworks for understanding power dynamics, negotiation psychology, and strategic communication principles that would be essential for managing complex confrontational situations effectively. Catherine's experience with high-stakes diplomatic negotiations provided valuable perspective on managing emotionally charged situations while maintaining focus on strategic objectives. Her analysis of potential confrontational scenarios with Richard provided strategic guidance on optimal timing, messaging, and tactical approaches for various situations that might arise. Understanding how to manage these situations strategically rather than reactively would prove essential for achieving favorable outcomes while preserving strategic advantages. The personal alliance network was developed more carefully due to the confidentiality requirements and emotional sensitivity involved in discussing relationship challenges with individuals who could provide personal support and perspective. These relationships needed to provide genuine friendship and emotional support while maintaining appropriate discretion about strategic planning activities. My primary personal alliance was with Isabella Martinez, a successful entertainment industry executive who had navigated her own complex relationship challenges involving financial manipulation and control attempts. Isabella's personal experience with similar situations provided valuable emotional support and practical insights into managing the psychological aspects of confrontational relationship dynamics. Our friendship had developed over several years through professional networking activities, but deepened significantly when Isabella shared her own experiences with relationship manipulation and the strategic approaches she had employed for regaining control and independence. Her perspective provided both emotional validation and practical guidance based on successful navigation of similar challenges. Isabella's understanding of the emotional toll involved in managing sophisticated manipulation campaigns provided essential support for maintaining psychological health and strategic perspective throughout the challenging process of planning and implementing countermeasures. Her friendship offered both emotional refuge and strategic consultation based on personal experience with similar situations. My secondary personal alliance was with Dr. Rachel Thompson, a close friend from Columbia University, who had become a successful international development economist working with multilateral organizations on complex financial and economic policy issues. Rachel's professional background provided valuable perspective on international financial systems, while her personal friendship offered emotional support and objective analysis of strategic options. Rachel's expertise in international economics and policy development provided valuable insights into the regulatory and operational aspects of my offshore financial arrangements, while her friendship offered emotional support and strategic perspective based on long-term understanding of my personality, capabilities, and objectives. Our conversations addressed both the technical aspects of managing complex international financial structures and the personal considerations involved in managing challenging relationship dynamics. Rachel's combination of professional expertise and personal friendship provided unique value for strategic planning and emotional support. The alliance-building process also included developing relationships with specialized service providers who could provide tactical support for various aspects of strategic planning and implementation. These relationships included private investigators, security consultants, travel coordinators, and communication specialists who could provide specific capabilities if confrontational situations required specialized support. The Private Investigation Alliance was established with Harrison Security Group, a boutique firm specializing in discrete intelligence gathering and background research for high-net-worth individuals facing complex personal or professional challenges. While immediate investigation was not necessary, the relationship provided access to capabilities that could prove valuable if Richard's behavior escalated or if detailed intelligence about his activities became strategically important. The Security Consulting Alliance was developed with Meridian Protection Services, which provided personal security and operational protection services for executives and high-profile individuals facing various threat scenarios. Again, immediate security services were not required, but the relationship provided access to expertise and capabilities that could prove essential if confrontational situations created personal safety concerns. The comprehensive alliance network provided multiple layers of professional expertise, personal support, and specialized capabilities that created substantial strategic advantages for managing whatever confrontational situations might arise with Richard. Each alliance relationship offered specific value while contributing to overall strategic capability that exceeded what individual preparation could achieve. The alliance-building process revealed that sophisticated strategic challenges required collaborative approaches that leveraged diverse expertise and capabilities from multiple specialized professionals. The complexity of managing relationship manipulation while preserving financial security, professional reputation, and personal safety demanded resources and expertise that extended far beyond individual capabilities. However, the alliance network also created strategic vulnerabilities that required careful management to prevent inadvertent disclosure of sensitive information or strategic intentions. Each alliance relationship involved balancing the benefits of access to expertise and support against the risks of compromising operational security or revealing strategic plans prematurely. The alliance management process required developing sophisticated communication protocols, information sharing guidelines, and coordination mechanisms that enabled effective collaboration while maintaining appropriate confidentiality and strategic security. These protocols addressed both ongoing relationship management and crisis activation procedures that could mobilize alliance resources quickly when confrontational situations arose. The Strategic Alliance Network provided comprehensive capabilities for managing complex confrontational situations while maintaining operational security and strategic flexibility. The combination of legal protection, financial optimization, psychological support, security expertise, communication capabilities, and personal relationships created foundation for confident strategic action, regardless of how Richard's behavior might continue evolving. The alliance-building phase concluded with recognition that comprehensive strategic preparation had created optimal conditions for managing whatever confrontational challenges might arise, while preserving long-term interests and achieving strategic objectives. The network of professional and personal relationships provided both immediate tactical capabilities and long-term strategic advantages that would enable effective response to various escalation scenarios. The motivational significance of this alliance-building phase demonstrates how strategic relationship development can create collaborative capabilities that enable individuals to address complex challenges that would be impossible to manage through individual effort alone. Rather than attempting to navigate sophisticated confrontational situations in isolation, the alliance approach multiplied available resources and expertise while providing emotional support and strategic perspective. The phase also illustrates how systematic preparation and professional relationship building can transform apparent vulnerabilities into strategic advantages when challenging circumstances arise. The alliance network provided confidence and capabilities that enabled strategic action from positions of strength rather than reactive responses based on individual limitations or emotional reactions. The comprehensive alliance network had established essential relationships and expertise foundations. But implementing effective countermeasures to Richard's escalating manipulation campaign required systematic mobilization of financial resources, operational capabilities, and strategic assets that would enable decisive action when confrontational circumstances inevitably arose. The resource mobilization process encompassed optimization of existing offshore financial arrangements, expansion of operational capabilities through strategic partnerships, enhancement of information gathering systems, and development of tactical resources that could provide immediate support during high-stakes confrontational situations. Each resource category required careful evaluation, strategic positioning, and coordination with alliance network capabilities to ensure maximum effectiveness when implementation became necessary. The financial resource optimization began with comprehensive analysis of my existing offshore banking relationships and investment structures to identify opportunities for enhanced liquidity, operational flexibility, and strategic positioning that would support various confrontational scenarios. This analysis revealed substantial opportunities for improvement that could provide significant advantages during challenging situations. The Swiss banking arrangements provided exceptional security and privacy protections, but the investment structures had been optimized primarily for long-term growth rather than immediate liquidity and tactical flexibility. Working with David Kim at Goldman Sachs, we restructured these arrangements to provide enhanced access to liquid assets while maintaining privacy protections and tax efficiency that had been carefully established over previous years. The restructuring process involved converting portions of long-term investment holdings into money market instruments and short-term bonds that could provide immediate access to substantial funds without compromising the overall investment strategy or triggering significant tax consequences. These changes created tactical flexibility while preserving strategic positioning for long-term wealth management objectives. The Cayman Islands structures were optimized for enhanced operational flexibility through establishment of additional corporate entities that could provide diverse operational capabilities while maintaining privacy protections and regulatory compliance. These entities created multiple operational pathways that could support various strategic initiatives while preventing any single point of vulnerability that could compromise overall strategic positioning. The optimization process also involved establishing additional banking relationships in Singapore and Luxembourg that provided geographic diversification and additional operational capabilities for managing complex international transactions. These relationships created redundant operational pathways that would ensure continued access to financial resources, regardless of potential challenges to any individual banking relationship. The enhanced financial arrangements provided immediate access to liquid assets exceeding $5 million, with additional resources available through established credit facilities and investment liquidation procedures that could be implemented rapidly when circumstances required substantial financial deployment. This liquidity positioning created confidence for managing various confrontational scenarios without concern about resource constraints or timing limitations. The operational capability expansion focused on developing infrastructure and systems that could support sophisticated strategic initiatives while maintaining operational security and regulatory compliance. This infrastructure development encompassed communication systems, information management capabilities, travel and logistics support, and administrative coordination mechanisms that would enable effective implementation of complex strategic plans. The communication infrastructure was enhanced through establishment of secure communication protocols that provided confidential channels for coordination with alliance network members while protecting sensitive strategic information from potential surveillance or interception. These protocols included encrypted email systems, secure video conferencing capabilities, and protected telephone services that could enable confident strategic coordination. The information management systems were expanded to provide comprehensive documentation and analysis capabilities for tracking Richard's behavioral patterns, legal developments, and strategic opportunities that could influence tactical decision-making. These systems included secure database management, analytical software tools, and reporting mechanisms that could support evidence-based strategic planning and implementation monitoring. The travel and logistics infrastructure was developed to provide immediate deployment capabilities for various geographic scenarios that might arise during confrontational situations. This infrastructure included relationships with executive travel services, luxury accommodation providers, and ground transportation arrangements that could support rapid deployment to various international locations when strategic positioning required geographic flexibility. The administrative coordination mechanisms were established to provide seamless management of complex strategic initiatives involving multiple alliance network members, resource deployment activities, and operational requirements. These mechanisms included project management systems, coordination protocols, and oversight procedures that would ensure effective implementation of sophisticated strategic plans. The information gathering capabilities were substantially enhanced to provide comprehensive intelligence about Richard's activities, behavioral patterns, and strategic planning that could influence tactical approaches and timing decisions. While respecting legal and ethical boundaries, these capabilities provided valuable insights into Richard's thinking and intentions that were essential for strategic planning effectiveness. The enhanced intelligence capabilities included systematic monitoring of Richard's professional activities, social media presence, and public appearances that could provide insights into his psychological state, strategic thinking, and potential vulnerability points. This information was gathered through publicly available sources and professional networking activities that provided legitimate access to relevant information. The intelligence gathering also encompassed analysis of Richard's financial activities and business relationships through professional networks and industry contacts that could provide insights into his strategic capabilities and potential pressure points. Understanding Richard's professional situation and financial position was essential for evaluating his likely responses to various confrontational approaches. The information analysis capabilities were enhanced through engagement of specialized consultants who provided expertise in behavioral analysis, strategic assessment, and predictive modeling that could support more sophisticated strategic planning and tactical decision-making. These analytical capabilities provided objective frameworks for evaluating strategic options and predicting likely outcomes under various scenarios. The tactical resource development focused on establishing immediate response capabilities that could provide essential support during crisis situations or high-stakes confrontational encounters. These resources encompassed emergency response protocols, crisis communication capabilities, and protective services that could be activated rapidly when circumstances required immediate tactical support. The emergency response protocols were developed in coordination with security alliance partners to provide immediate protection and support services that could be activated through single communication channels when threatening situations arose. These protocols addressed various escalation scenarios, ranging from verbal confrontations through potential physical safety concerns. The crisis communication capabilities were established through alliance relationships with strategic communication consultants who specialized in reputation management and crisis response for high-profile individuals facing complex personal or professional challenges. These capabilities could provide immediate strategic communication support during confrontational situations that might attract public attention or professional scrutiny. The protective services were arranged through security alliance partners who could provide immediate personal protection, secure transportation, and safe accommodation services when confrontational situations created personal safety concerns. While such services were not immediately necessary, their availability provided confidence and strategic options that could prove essential during challenging circumstances. The strategic positioning process involved optimizing my overall situation to maximize advantages while minimizing vulnerabilities that Richard might attempt to exploit during confrontational situations. This positioning encompassed professional relationships, social connections, reputation management, and operational security measures that would support strategic objectives while protecting against potential countermeasures. The professional positioning focused on strengthening relationships within my consulting practice and international business networks that could provide support, validation, and protection against potential reputation attacks or professional interference that Richard might attempt during confrontational situations. These relationships provided both defensive protection and offensive capabilities for managing complex strategic challenges. The consulting practice relationships were strengthened through enhanced service delivery, expanded engagement scope, and deeper partnership development with key clients who appreciated sophisticated financial advisory services and discretionary client relationship management. These relationships provided both financial security and professional validation that could support strategic positioning during challenging periods. The international business networks were expanded through increased participation in professional associations, industry conferences, and collaborative projects that enhanced reputation and credibility within specialized financial services communities. These networks provided both strategic intelligence and professional support that could prove valuable during various confrontational scenarios. The social positioning involved careful management of relationship dynamics within our shared social circles to prevent potential isolation or reputation damage that Richard might attempt through manipulation of mutual friends and professional acquaintances. This positioning required subtle preparation without creating obvious anticipation of confrontational situations. The reputation management strategies were developed in coordination with strategic communication alliance partners to provide proactive protection against potential attacks on professional credibility or personal character that Richard might pursue during confrontational situations. These strategies included both defensive protocols and offensive capabilities for managing complex reputation challenges. The operational security measures were enhanced to provide comprehensive protection against potential surveillance, information gathering, or interference activities that Richard might employ to gather intelligence about my strategic planning or resource positioning. These measures addressed both technological security and procedural protocols for protecting sensitive information and activities. The resource mobilization and strategic positioning activities were coordinated carefully to avoid detection by Richard while creating optimal conditions for implementing effective countermeasures when confrontational situations arose. This coordination required sophisticated timing and operational security that balanced preparation effectiveness with strategic surprise advantages. The timing considerations involved accelerating resource positioning activities as Richard's behavioral patterns suggested increasing likelihood of escalation toward more comprehensive control attempts. The pattern recognition analysis indicated that confrontational situations were becoming increasingly probable, requiring enhanced preparation timelines and tactical readiness. The operational security protocols were implemented to prevent inadvertent disclosure of strategic preparations while maintaining normal relationship dynamics and household routines that would not alert Richard to enhanced readiness for confrontational situations. These protocols addressed communication security, activity coordination, and behavioral consistency that preserved strategic advantages. The strategic coordination mechanisms were established to enable rapid activation of comprehensive response capabilities when confrontational situations arose. These mechanisms included communication protocols, resource deployment procedures, and alliance network coordination systems that could mobilize sophisticated strategic responses within hours rather than days or weeks. The resource mobilization and strategic positioning phase created comprehensive capabilities for managing complex confrontational situations while maintaining strategic advantages and preserving long-term interests. The combination of enhanced financial liquidity, operational infrastructure, intelligence capabilities, tactical resources, and strategic positioning provided confidence for addressing various escalation scenarios that Richard's behavior patterns suggested were increasingly likely. The enhanced strategic position provided multiple pathways for managing confrontational situations, ranging from sophisticated negotiation approaches through comprehensive relationship restructuring that could address fundamental problems while preserving appropriate interests for all legitimate stakeholders. The resource capabilities created options and flexibility that enabled strategic choice rather than reactive responses during challenging circumstances. The psychological impact of comprehensive strategic preparation provided confidence and emotional stability that would prove essential for maintaining strategic clarity and decision-making effectiveness during high-stress confrontational situations. Understanding that sophisticated preparation had created optimal conditions for managing various scenarios enabled focus on strategic objectives rather than concern about resource limitations or tactical vulnerabilities. The resource mobilization phase concluded with recognition that comprehensive strategic preparation had created exceptional advantages for managing whatever confrontational challenges might arise with Richard. The combination of financial resources, operational capabilities, alliance network support, and strategic positioning provided foundation for confident action from positions of strength, rather than defensive reactions based on individual limitations. The motivational significance of this resource mobilization phase demonstrates how systematic preparation and strategic positioning can create comprehensive advantages that enable confident management of complex confrontational situations. Rather than hoping for favorable outcomes or accepting limitations imposed by challenging circumstances, the resource mobilization approach enabled strategic choice and tactical flexibility that supported optimal outcomes. The phase also illustrates how sophisticated preparation can transform potential confrontational situations from threatening challenges into strategic opportunities for achieving better outcomes and establishing more appropriate relationship dynamics. The resource capabilities provided confidence that confrontational situations could be managed effectively while preserving long-term interests and achieving strategic objectives that would benefit all legitimate stakeholders involved. The comprehensive resource mobilization and strategic positioning had established optimal conditions for managing confrontational situations, but translating these capabilities into effective action required detailed strategic planning that addressed specific scenarios, tactical approaches, and implementation sequences that would enable decisive response when Richard's escalating control attempts crossed boundaries that could no longer be accommodated through diplomatic management. The strategic planning refinement process encompassed scenario development, tactical option analysis, timing optimization, risk assessment, and contingency planning that would enable coordinated response across multiple dimensions of the confrontational challenge. Each planning element required integration with alliance network capabilities, resource deployment strategies, and operational security protocols that would ensure maximum effectiveness while minimizing unintended consequences or strategic vulnerabilities. The scenario development process began with systematic analysis of Richard's behavioral patterns and escalation trajectory to identify probable confrontational situations that would require strategic response. This analysis revealed several distinct escalation pathways that suggested different types of confrontational scenarios, each requiring specific tactical approaches and resource deployment strategies. The first scenario pathway involved continued incremental escalation of financial control attempts through increasingly restrictive monitoring, approval requirements, and access limitations that would gradually establish comprehensive authority over household financial management, while creating psychological pressure for compliance with broader relationship control objectives. This pathway suggested confrontational situations that would require sophisticated financial demonstration, combined with clear boundary establishment. The analysis revealed that Richard's incremental approach was designed to establish precedence and psychological acceptance of his financial authority through gradual expansion of control mechanisms that appeared reasonable when implemented individually, but created comprehensive dominance when viewed systematically. This strategy suggested that effective response would require dramatic demonstration of financial independence rather than incremental resistance that could be overcome through continued pressure. The tactical approach for this scenario pathway focused on comprehensive financial revelation that would demonstrate the complete ineffectiveness of Richard's control mechanisms while establishing clear boundaries about acceptable relationship dynamics going forward. This approach required careful timing and presentation that would maximize psychological impact while minimizing relationship damage or reputation consequences. The second scenario pathway involved acceleration toward crisis confrontation through dramatic financial restrictions or ultimatum situations that would force immediate choices between compliance with Richard's control demands or open resistance that could escalate toward relationship termination. This pathway suggested confrontational situations requiring immediate decisive response with comprehensive strategic deployment. The analysis indicated that Richard's personality characteristics and strategic thinking patterns suggested probable acceleration toward crisis confrontation if incremental control mechanisms encountered effective resistance or failed to achieve desired compliance results. His professional background and psychological profile indicated preference for decisive action over prolonged negotiation when facing strategic challenges. The tactical approach for this scenario pathway required comprehensive preparation for immediate strategic deployment that could demonstrate overwhelming advantages while providing clear pathways for relationship resolution that preserved appropriate interests for all stakeholders. This approach demanded sophisticated coordination of multiple strategic elements with precise timing and execution. The third scenario pathway involved expansion of control attempts beyond financial mechanisms to include professional interference, social isolation, or reputation attacks that would create multiple pressure points for achieving compliance with broader relationship control objectives. This pathway suggested confrontational situations requiring coordinated defensive and offensive strategic responses across multiple domains. The analysis revealed that individuals with Richard's professional background and control orientation often escalated beyond financial manipulation when initial approaches proved ineffective, particularly when their self-image and social status were challenged by effective resistance to their authority. This escalation pattern suggested potential for broader confrontational challenges requiring comprehensive strategic response. The tactical approach for this scenario pathway required sophisticated coordination of legal protections, professional, relationship management, social positioning strategies, and reputation defense mechanisms that could neutralize multiple attack vectors while maintaining strategic initiative for achieving favorable resolution outcomes. The tactical option analysis process involved detailed evaluation of specific approaches for managing each scenario pathway, including assessment of probable effectiveness, resource requirements, risk factors, and strategic implications that would influence overall confrontational outcomes and long-term relationship dynamics. The financial demonstration options ranged from subtle displays of independent resources through comprehensive revelation of offshore banking capabilities and international asset positions. Each option provided different levels of psychological impact and strategic advantage while involving different risks regarding privacy, operational security, and potential escalation consequences. The subtle demonstration approaches involved strategic deployment of independent resources for specific purposes that would indicate financial capabilities without revealing comprehensive scope or international infrastructure. These approaches provided controlled revelation that could establish boundaries while preserving operational security and strategic flexibility for future developments. The comprehensive revelation approaches involved dramatic demonstration of offshore banking relationships and international asset positions that would completely undermine Richard's control mechanisms while establishing overwhelming strategic advantages for relationship negotiation or termination processes. These approaches provided maximum psychological impact while requiring careful management of privacy and security considerations. The boundary establishment options encompassed communication strategies, behavioral protocols, and enforcement mechanisms that would define acceptable relationship dynamics while providing clear consequences for continued control attempts or manipulation behaviors. Each option required careful balance between firmness and flexibility that would preserve relationship possibilities while protecting strategic interests. The communication strategies addressed specific language, timing, and presentation approaches for establishing boundaries clearly while minimizing defensive reactions or escalation behaviors that could complicate resolution processes. These strategies required sophisticated understanding of Richard's psychological patterns and communication preferences to achieve maximum effectiveness. The behavioral protocols defined specific responses to various control attempts or manipulation, behaviors that would demonstrate consistent boundary enforcement while preserving dignity and strategic positioning for all parties involved. These protocols required systematic preparation and coordination with alliance network capabilities to ensure effective implementation. The enforcement mechanisms established consequences for boundary violations that would provide credible deterrence, while maintaining proportional responses that preserved opportunities for constructive relationship development. These mechanisms required careful calibration to provide appropriate incentives without creating unnecessary confrontation or relationship damage. The timing optimization analysis addressed critical factors that would influence the effectiveness of various tactical approaches, including Richard's psychological state, external circumstances, seasonal considerations, and strategic positioning factors that could enhance or diminish confrontational outcomes. The psychological timing factors focused on identifying periods when Richard would be most receptive to strategic communication or most vulnerable to dramatic revelation approaches. This analysis required understanding of his stress patterns, professional cycles, and emotional rhythms that could influence his responses to confrontational situations. The external timing factors addressed circumstances beyond immediate relationship dynamics that could influence confrontational effectiveness, including professional obligations, social commitments, family considerations, and economic conditions that might affect strategic positioning or resource deployment requirements. The seasonal considerations encompassed timing factors related to travel patterns, social calendars, and professional schedules that could provide optimal context for implementing various tactical approaches. These considerations addressed both immediate tactical advantages and strategic implications for relationship development or resolution processes. The strategic positioning timing addressed coordination requirements with alliance network activities, resource deployment schedules, and operational security considerations that would ensure optimal implementation conditions while maintaining strategic advantages and operational effectiveness. The risk assessment process involved comprehensive analysis of potential negative consequences associated with various tactical approaches, including evaluation of probability, magnitude, and management strategies for risks that could affect strategic objectives or stakeholder interests. The relationship risks encompassed potential damage to marriage dynamics, social relationships, or family connections that could result from confrontational approaches or strategic revelations. These risks required careful evaluation against strategic benefits and long-term relationship objectives to ensure appropriate balance between immediate tactical effectiveness and sustainable outcomes. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.